through the inspiration of a video Elder Pastor did called Sunset of the Dollar, and he actually put a link in the description box to Jim Willie's interview that was going on, and he was going into how the dollar pretty much is losing their value and how the nations are breaking away from the US dollar. Now, earlier this morning I watched this video Elder Apostle Tar did. Then I ended up watching the whole entire video of Sunset of the Dollar, Jim Willie. I ended up watching the whole video. Very good video. It draws you in. He makes it pretty much plain to understand the position of the dollar and how it works as far as the world economy is concerned. He tells you how these Eastern nations are pretty much pulling out of the dollar, pooling among themselves, using their own currencies among themselves to trade in oil, and how the U.S. pretty much, as they always do, started the war in Syria because of the pipeline. Hold on one second. All right, Salakia for that. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, I just kind of lost my train of thought. That phone call kind of threw me off a little bit. Salakia. So pretty much just go into the word isolate. The word isolate, because this is what the nations are doing. That's the name of the lesson. The isolation of Babylon the Great. You brothers that have been studying should already know what the word, who Babylon the Great is. That's America. That's code in the scriptures for America. And the word isolate means cause a person or place to be or remain alone or apart from others. And this is what's happening. All of the antics of America are causing the nations to isolate themselves and move away from America, from the American way, from the US dollar, and causing them to, because the US dollar is causing a lot of great debt among these nations, and it's causing them to alienate themselves away from this place because of the financial woes that are happening to these nations. Now I'm going to play a little clip. I may have to come back and do a part 2 to this because I just got a call I was waiting for, and I have to start making moves. So we'll see how the spirit goes. Maybe if I do stop it, come back and finish the lesson. If not, if the spirit wants me to just do the whole lesson now, I'll just do it now and just take care of that later, So this is the Sunset of the Dollar, Jim Willie. I hope they don't give me a strike because I'm going to play a little portion of this video, which I think is very important to explain the whole scenario of this lesson. So let's listen.
A couple of years ago, critical mass. The East, with the Eurasian trade zone, with the emerging market nations, and with BRICS, they provide the critical mass for abandoning the dollar. And they will form the nucleus of the RMB universe. U.S. cannot stop it. We can't do our usual thing of invade, destroy their economy. We cannot do our usual thing of sanctioning their banks and strangling them for their cash input. We can't do our usual thing. We cannot blow them all up. I have a new catchphrase. The United States is going to continue in its path and alienate the rest of the world, including its allies. And that will earn the United States its isolation. First comes the isolation financially and economically, Elijah.
Moving now to this next viewer's.
So pretty much that you heard him saying their antics are causing them to be isolated, to be alienated, because the reason why America was able to corner these different nations financially is because they were using the dollar as the world reserve currency. So now that they're moving into their own currency, what's happening is America doesn't have that sway over them nations anymore like they used to. So what's happening is now they're going to have to resort to more violence, more false flags, so that to justify them being able to get or gain control again, which that's going to cause mass conflict, which this is the Lord stirring that up, because he's stirring up the kings of that region to get ready for what's called in the Bible Armageddon, which is the mountain of the troops. All right, that's a good one. This is the up and coming elder Karatazar from Vegas, Obadiah chapter 1 verse 2. Behold, I have made thee small among the heathen, thou art greatly despised. And you know that's Amalek behind all of what's going on today, which is biblical prophecy. The scripture says, surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. So what I want to do is go to Daniel chapter 2 and verses 31. I'm going to jump around a little bit here in Daniel, the 2nd chapter. First, we're going to go to the 31st verse, which it says, the king's dream. It says, thou sawest, O king, and behold, a great image. And this is the image that Daniel saw in the vision. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. All right, now we're going to jump down to verse 33, which is the part where we're looking for. His legs of iron, his feet part of iron, and part of clay. This is a representation of the Roman Empire, the last part of that statue prior to the Lord Yahushua coming back, who is the stone that hit this image at his feet and knocked it down. Because Yahushua is coming to take these nations down, because he is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Now let's jump down to the 40th verse, what you see here, the interpretation, Babylon, the first kingdom, Medo-Persia and Greece, and we're going to what? Rome. So the prophecy states that once Rome was to rule, that was going to be the end of this age. But there was a break, which was explained a little more in fuller detail when we read the book of Revelation, where the beast had a wound and the deadly wound was healed. See, this is the part that most people don't understand, which is the break for that 1,000-year period that Satan was bound, which is Esau, the Edomites, and then let loose. And we're at that short season where they were let loose. So it says Daniel 2 and 40, and the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. And we can find this in the book of Daniel 7 and 7, where it compares the fourth beast, which is Rome, to as having iron teeth. Okay, so jumping down in the interest of time, verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And you see that happening. The kingdom is divided. Just dealing with America alone, the kingdom is divided, and pretty much in half, the Republicans against the Democrats. But the actual whole Edomite empire structure of the 7 heads and 10 horns are divided also. And this division comes financially and many other ways, but the main one is financially. And that's how they are divided. as well as, their differences and, views and things of that nature. But the main division goes into this finance or financial system that's going on in the world today. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, because they still have their military. See, so they still have that power, that strength, dealing with America, dealing with NATO, or actually, NATO and the EU, It says, for as much as I saw the iron mixed with miry clay, the iron being strong is a representation of their military, but is also a representation of the certain EU nations that have a stronger economy than others. Like you have Switzerland, you have Germany, and others that have a stronger economy, and then you have some of the other so-called European nations that their economy is not as strong. And what this is causing also is causing the world to view what's going on, and the world to see that this dollar, these FRNs are not working anymore. They're not helping America. I'm sorry, they're not helping these different nations that have the American dollar prosper like they were prospering at one time with the same currency. It says, and the toes of the feet were part of iron, and the toes are 10 toes, which is a representation of these EU nations, the European Union, which really consists of 10, and then they just kept adding onto it. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly weak. So before we read that, let's go back here and deal with the miry clay. All right, the miry clay was a statue, but the clay is also a big representation of the finance. All right, financially. So let's go to the book of Daniel. I'm sorry, the book of Habakkuk. My bad. Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 5 and 6. And it says, yea, also because he transgressed by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home. This is dealing with Esau, who enlarges his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. That's why these nations, are in the position that they're in such debt, because America just keeps taking and taking and taking and taking and taking, and the people are tired of this place doing that to them. It says, but gathereth unto him all nations, because they're trying to bring in the new so-called New World Order, and heapeth unto him all people. That's that New World Order, out of many one, e pluribus unum. Shall not all these take up a parable against him? And this is what's happening right now. These nations are getting tired of America, and they're calling out their bullshit. And they're also not just calling their bullshit out, but they're opting to trade among themselves using their own currency and cutting the dollar out. Because the dollar is volatile. The dollar is pretty much causing their economy to down spiral. It says, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And this is what they're saying. How are you going to keep doing what you're doing to us? This is why the majority of the nations have what? Well, not the majority of them, but you have a lot of nations out there that have the missile, which goes into Joel, the 3rd chapter. Let the weak say, I am strong. It says, and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. Now, when you look up this word thick clay, it's not talking about actual clay itself. It's speaking about great debt, ibatyat, right? It's a weight of pledges, heavy debts. So these heavy debts is what's causing the turmoil among the EU nations. It's causing the turmoil among America. And it's also causing the turmoil among these different nations. This is why you have the corporations like the BRICS or the Shanghai Corporation, which is these Eastern countries, some from the West, but South America, more or less, coming together as one to battle against the ruling power of the FRN, or the so-called United States dollar, the US dollar. And this is causing a lot of turmoil. And this is why you see a lot of these wars being started. People think that the war in Syria was started because of this, that, and the other. But it's nothing more than, this hole over here, this thought, this, instead of that hole over there, this hole over here, THOH, this hole over here, that she can't control what they're trying to do, because Iran is trying to run a pipeline through Syria into the Mediterranean so that they can better trade with Russia and other nations. So this is what that whole situation is about. So this heavy debt is causing turmoil and problems, throughout the entire world. And this is why you see a lot of these Eastern nations pulling away from the US dollar and trading among themselves. All right, so now going back to Daniel 2:42, it says, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly weak, partly broken. Yeah, because financially you have some that are strong, but others are weak. And what that's causing is that causing the stronger nations to have to carry the burden of the weaker ones financially, and it's causing the turmoil amongst them. And this is why you have, situations like Brexit, and other nations trying to pull out of that union because it's not benefiting them, because what's happening is it's causing the stronger nations to have to bear the weaker ones' financial woes, and it's causing them problems. All right. It says, and whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, meaning they're going to try to make all different types of deals. They're going to try to come together as a union, as a unit, but it's not going to work, because the Lord has set up a financial insecurity or instability in these nations, because it's all to fulfill prophecy. It says, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. Yeah, because they won't be able to mix together. Because remember, this is a direct prophecy from the Lord Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai, breaking this whole thing up. And the Lord is causing these nations to find out what they identified what the problem is, and they're looking to cut the problem out. And the problem is Babylon the Great, or America, and this debt-bearing note called the U.S. dollar. That's why it's called the isolation of Babylon the Great. All right, now let's jump from there. Let's go to Daniel, the 7th chapter. Let me bring another tab up. Let's go to Daniel, the 7th chapter. And the 8th verse. Matter of fact, I considered the horns, and behold, the horns is dealing with the 10 horns. And behold, there came up among them another little horn, which is America, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots, which is going back into the 3 heads, among the EU, which wasn't called the EU back then, but these 3 European nations that were in control of America prior to America so-called getting her independence. And that was the Spanish-American War, the French-American War, and the War of Independence, which was with Great Britain. And those were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in his horn were eyes like the eyes of man, which is dealing with their knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, right? And a mouth speaking great things. And you see that happening right now, the mouth speaking great things. Now let's jump down to the 19th verse, and we're going to go here. And says, then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which is the Roman Empire, now extended all the way to America, which is the revival of the ancient Roman Empire with her allies, the EU and NATO, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And you see that happening. This does not fit anybody else but America. Back then it fit the Roman Empire. America is nothing more than the resurrection of the Roman Empire. And they're doing exactly the same thing that the Roman Empire was doing. Going out, conquering different lands, taking their resources, spreading their military too thin, devaluing their currency so they can keep paying and keep these wars going and keep whatever other madness going. And they're going the same way as ancient Rome. Because when we read in Revelation, the 17th chapter, it speaks about this beast, when it comes into power, it was set up to go into perdition or into destruction. All right, it says, and of the 10 horns that were in his head, right, it says, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellow. Because this is what America does. They look down upon these other nations and they puff at these other nations. The word stout is rab, which means exalted. Great, 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 captain, chief, you know. So they're exalted. They're looking down upon these other nations, especially those so-called European nations too. So the nations are getting mad at this whole called America. Now, let's go from there to the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, and verse 7. It says, Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hand that made all the earth drunken. And that's what's happening. All these nations have drunk of this cup. This is why they became rich. But they didn't understand about the financial hangover they would get afterwards, because they still had to carry this whole America with her debts. So it says, Salakio. All right. So it says, the nations have drunken of her wine, therefore the nations are mad. Meaning they're bugged out of their mind because they're following the philosophies of America. But also they're pissed off at this place because of the condition that they found themselves in. This is why we read in Habakkuk now, 2 and 7, shall they not rise up suddenly that shall bite thee, and awake that shall vex thee, and thou shalt be for booties unto them. Because they're going to spoil America. Because thou hast spoiled many nations, all the remnant of the people shall spoil thee. It's only right. Because of men's blood and for the violence of the land. And this violence has extended throughout the 4 corners of the earth. That's why it speaks about in Psalm 73 how they don't keep, well, here also they don't keep at home. You know, they walk throughout the earth. And that goes back directly to the blessing of Esau that was given to him by Isaac, which was the blessing of the sword. And by the sword of Esau, this is how he conquered the whole world. And that's how the Lord said he would do it. He would receive, the earth pretty much by that sword, by his blessing. In so many words. It says, of the city and of all that dwell therein. Woe to him that coveteth an evil covetousness to his house, that he may set his nest on high, that he may be delivered from the power of evil. Yeah, and this is what they've done. They made sure that they had a security, that nest egg, so that when the whole world was in financial ruin, they could be financially stable, even though they may be losing money in the long run, which they're really not losing money. They're making more money. So they're able to withstand whatever financial woes come down the pike because they have stolen all of the resources from the world and still stealing. Thou hast consulted shame to thy house by cutting off many people, and hast sinned against thy soul. For the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. Woe to him that buildeth the town with blood, and establisheth a city by iniquity. Now let's go from there to Isaiah chapter 13, because this is causing these nations to peep what's going on with America, and it's causing them to push away from the US dollar, push away from America. The only time they're using America is just as a come up, so to speak, as a financial springboard, So this is Isaiah 13 and 14. It says, and it shall be as a chase roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up, they shall every man turn to his own people and flee everyone into his own land. See? So they're going to flee everyone into their own land because they're seeing the ruin of America. They're seeing Babylon the Great's ship sinking. So they're opting to move away from it and not get caught up in that financial sinking of this great ship that was once sailing, but now it has all type of holes and gaping holes in it, and the ship is just constantly sinking. And the nations from afar off are still making money off of it, but they're not into it like they used to be years ago. Now, let's jump from there to the book of Jeremiah 50. Jeremiah chapter 50 and verse 16. It says, cut off the sower from Babylon and him that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest. Yeah, because they're not going to be able to benefit anymore like they did at one time. For fear of the oppressing sword, they shall turn everyone to his people, and they shall flee everyone to his own land. And this is why you see Russia and China and South Korea, and them different nations, Brazil and different other nations moving away from what's supposed to be going back to the Bretton Woods Agreement of 1944-45, where the American dollar became the world reserve currency. And everything had to be traded in dollars, in American dollars. People are not going for that anymore. They're pulling away from that. And this is what's causing America this strife, this agony, this anger. And this is why they're going into these different countries and making it seem like these countries are doing things to provoke America to go to war when it's the other way around. And these nations being now that they have the backing of each other, they have the nuclear missiles, they have the financial capability of not needing this place anymore, they're opting to move away from that debt-bearing note and that oppressing fist that has been ruling over them for the longest. All right, now let's move from there. Let's go back to Jeremiah 51. And let's go to the 8th and the 9th verse. It says, Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. How for her? Take balm for her pain, if so be she may be healed. So those stimulus packages and the propping up of the financial system of this place is not going to happen. There's not going to be anything that's going to be able to stimulate this country to really become so-called great like it used to be at one time. It says, we would have healed Babylon, but she is not healed. Why? Because the Lord gave her an incurable wound. And that incurable wound is precipitated by prophecy. Forsake her and let us go everyone to his own country. And this is what you see happening right now with these different nations. This is why when you watch this video that Elder Pastor put in his description box, all of those top nations are moving away from the U.S. dollar, because the U.S. dollar has pretty much been the bane of their existence, and they no longer want to deal in that money because it's not as beneficial as it used to be at one time. For her judgments reacheth unto heaven and is lifted up even to the skies, because now is a time of judgment that the Lord is bringing upon them. This is why you see America slowly faltering, because this is the time of the great judgment. And these nations are pulling away from America, which they're the ones that got missiles. They're going to shoot their missiles on America. Their European allies are moving away from them, because now even among as Jim Willie was saying, even among those so-called Arab nations, they're opting to trade, their resources with Russia and China and other nations, even though America is saying don't do it. But they got to go with their best interest of things that's going to get them out of that in that debt that they're in. You see? So this is Revelation 17, and we're going to go straight to the point. Victory of the Lamb, verse 14. These shall make war with the Lamb, which is dealing with EU, NATO, America, which is the whore, and pretty much all these other nations, but we're dealing mainly with Esau right now. And the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. And he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes of nations and tongues. That whore is America. These peoples and nations and tongues, that's their so-called melting pot. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Why? Because even among these devils' allies, they're going to turn upon America. Let's see if I can find that verse. Obadiah 1 and 7. All the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. Now a lot of these people, they don't even want you in their country, because they already know what the problem is. You're the problem. You go to their country, you infest their country, you say you're there for help, but all you do is destroy them. And even Jim Willie mentioned about the treaties going. He spoke about all the treaties that America breaks. He said the very first one he mentioned was what? The treaties of Gad, the so-called Native American Indians of this land. So you don't keep your word. It says, the men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee, because they took your bread, they took your money. Now they're moving away from you, and eventually they're going to fire at you. And prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him, because you are not going to understand why this is happening to you, because you're just that bugged out. All right, now going back to Revelation 17 and 17. For the Most High had put in their hearts to fulfill his will. And this is why it's happening, for prophecy's sake. This is why you got the BRICS nation and the Shanghai corporations, if they're even still around. You know, the different alliances with these top superpowers and other smaller governmental agencies that are opting out of the dollar, because it's not beneficial to them anymore. It says, and to agree and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the Most High shall be fulfilled. And that's the point. When the words of the Most High are fulfilled, that's when it's going to come down. And this is why things are happening and moving in the direction that they're moving, because the words of the Lord are taking place and taking hold of the earth. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city, which is America, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Yeah, and the kings of the earth are tired of the oppression. That's why they're opting to move away from America. So let's go. And I had a couple of other precepts, but I think I'm going to close out with this one here in Daniel 2 and 44 and 45, the divine kingdom. And in the days of these kings shall the power of heaven set up a kingdom. This kingdom is dealing with Yahushai and slash Yasha'Allah's kingdom, which shall never be destroyed. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It's only going to be for the nation of Israel. But it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Yeah. So all nations are going to be in subjection under Yahushai. This is why he's known as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. It says, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. This is dealing with Yahushai. Also reminds me of the vision that Ezra had with Yahushai and the big chariot he's coming in, which the prophet Ezra compared to a mountain. He was looking for the mountain or the place on the earth where this mountain was taken from, but he couldn't find it. All right, it says, and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, which is all of these different empires in one. It says, the great power hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. That's right. And this is what we see happening right now on the world scale. You know, this is why if you're wondering why these nations are opting to move out of not paying with the American or the U.S. dollar, is because the Lord is putting it in their heart to do that, to fulfill prophecy, because America already done her job. Just like it says, the nations are drunk, and therefore the nations are mad. The Lord said that America has been a golden cup. Everybody drank of that cup. Everybody was doing good until that poison of debt started stinging them. Now they no longer want to drink of that poisonous financial well that you've been pouring down their throat. They no longer want to drink of that poisonous philosophy of democracy that you've been pushing upon these nations. They want to opt out of it, and they want to be able to trade among themselves without your influence anymore. Because that great influence you had at one time, you lost over the world. You no longer have that sway over them. You no longer have that enchantment over these nations anymore. And shalom to the apostles and elders and brothers and sisters in the comment board. The elder Apostle Tara said, none of these other camps go into this. No, because, yep, that's right. They don't know. Oh, there he goes. Prophecy, 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 baby. That's right. So, like I said, this has been based off of the video that Elder Apostle Tara put on his channel, Sunset of the Dollar, where he put this in the description box. And I clicked on it, watched it this morning. I let y'all hear from about 35 minutes and 30 seconds to about 36 minutes 47 seconds, and pretty much that's where I got the title for the lesson, The Isolation of Babylon the Great, because America's antics are causing these nations to isolate or alienate themselves from America. And this is why we read scriptures like they're going to turn everyone to their own lands, because that's what's happening on the world scale. And this is why it's important to also watch financial news, because the prophecies are not only dealing with famine and hunger, which is the same thing, uproars of the peoples, but and wars and rumors of wars, but it's also dealing with financial woes, of the world that's going to cause this whole system to collapse, So with that, Salaki, I have to roll out now. I wanted to hit a couple more presets, but if the Spirit hit me when I finish what I have to do, Lord's will, I'll come back and do another part to this, or maybe go into something else. So with that, I pray that your brothers have been edified. And to the next